Okay, so hi and welcome to Cancel's Purple Belt podcast series, where we discuss leadership skills and Six Sigma approach. I'm Riaan Jeni, the CEO of and partner of Cancelled. We're a global consulting firm that offers a range of professional services across various industries. We specialize in providing tailored advice and solutions to help businesses grow and scale. Today, I'm talking with Jenny Yelton again, one of our good partners and friends. She's the founder and executive consultant for Purpose Driven Solutions, so PDS, who is aligning a purpose driven approach to business strategy. Hi, Jenny.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So, you've just been telling me about your escapades over the last while, and it flows nicely in with our conversations today around purpose, yeah?
Yeah, and it's actually, I'm kind of excited to talk about why I think purpose actually benefits business strategy. But before kind of give you my journey to where I came to purpose-driven solution and really how to use it as a strategy, I thought it'd be good to hear from you, Rion,
Mm-hmm.
about when I say purpose, what do you think of? How do you define purpose?
Jay, it's funny. I get this question relatively often when people say, "Well, what's your, how do you know you're going to do something, or where are you going with something?" And to me, it always comes down to the why. Why am I doing something? Why am I getting engaged? Why am I doing an engagement? Sorry. Why do I belong here? Why did I choose to follow this path? And I think for me, it was very interesting, especially at the beginning when I, became a consultant and now running a consulting firm, is the fact that, it took me a while to decide to do it, but I took the time out to write down in my little book, why am I doing this? What's the purpose of this? Because I knew at some stage I was going to have to reflect on it because it's not always easy, and you find yourself in positions where it's like everything is chaos, your whole life is all over the place, and then it's usually fun for me to go on my phone and I look at the list and I go, why did I do this? So that's something that's quite big for me, and that's I think in general I think a lot of people would benefit a lot more if they ask the question why a lot more. What about
I,
yourself,
I
Jimmy?
agree. Well, I agree with that, and I think that sometimes that's where it can get very complex is, when you have to start asking that question, why it can get a little deep, and
You need to
not
know.
everybody can do, well, not everybody can figure that out, right? And sometimes that depth of that question can be complicated and complex. And
Yeah,
I I feel and really personal too, right? Because you're talking about, when you go back and reflect on it is usually when it's moments of chaos and your doubt and self-doubt is going back to that list and saying, okay, why did I do this? Why am I taking this risk? Why? So it's when all these external forces are usually trying to drive your internal motivation to
yeah,
ask yourself why. And so I I think that's one of the reasons it's hard for people. And there's a lot of books out there about purpose, and you hear purpose quite a bit in conversations today. But
hmm,
if you ask a lot of people, well, how do you figure out your purpose? There's there's not not everybody takes that time to self-reflect, and it's not always that simple. But I will tell you that especially when you think about how it applies to business, because sometimes I think it can be so personal and so depth that people have a hard time aligning it to business and business strategy.
yeah,
Even myself, because it comes back to that kind of higher power sometimes. And that's as we talked about, not always an easy conversation, or should it be the conversation sometimes at the workplace? So, how do you get business leaders and employees to think about purpose? And actually, it came to me when I
hmm.
walked into a coffee shop.
Oh dear.
That's how it all came together for me. So,
So I guess you enjoy a cup of coffee, eh?
well, it does have its purpose. Coffee is good. Do you drink coffee?
Not really. No, I made the mistake once of overdosing on coffee. I was working at a manufacturing facility, and my office was right next to the kitchen. And the one day I made it my mission to every time someone goes in there for a coffee, I'm going to go have a coffee with them. And I think I got about 3 coffees in and I had to go home because it was just too much.
Your stomach is so sad.
It
Well,
was a
you
bit
might need a
funny.
better coffee.
It was quite funny at the time, but since then I've been staying away from caffeine. I drink a lot of tea though, so that comes in handy when I go to the UK.
Yeah, because everybody drinks tea in the UK. Yeah, and
Oh, yeah.
coffee's a staple here in America. Actually,
Hey,
funny
there's a lot of
enough,
benefit to it too,
I
yeah?
well, I didn't drink coffee until the pandemic. That was because I never really liked it. I love the smell of coffee, but I didn't drink it. But
Oh,
when I was
yeah.
trapped at home, I
There's not
thought,
a
well,
lot of
it's time to
things
be
that
an adult.
there's not a lot of things that smell as good as coffee. I mean, I got to say that. It's
It
especially like you say, good coffee. But yeah,
yes.
I mean, for me, it's like I don't run on coffee, but my wife does, and I'm very glad to make her a cup of coffee to keep her going during the day. So it's all good. So
Well, and it is
what's happened?
because coffee does have a purpose. But what was interesting is when I walked into this coffee shop, it wasn't about the Java, it was about the jive that made me
Okay.
really think about how purpose works. And it really kind of started with the people working behind the counter. So I'm going to tell you the story of how it transpired. But I went up and I asked the first barista while, after I placed my crazy order, because I always order coffees with lots of creamers and weird things.
Oh
I
yeah.
said, just curious. I just said, why do you work here? And she kind of looked at me a little like inquisitively and said, well, I get paid to make coffee. I'm going to school and this job is close to campus and it pays pretty well and the hours are flexible. And then she kind of like looked around and she whispered to me, plus, all the leftover pastries and donuts and stuff I get to take home, and that has actually kept me alive at certain points in the last couple of years.
Life of
And
a
so
student.
she was smiling. It was actually funny. So I added some extra money to her tip jar because I was like,
Shame.
well, eating more than donuts and bagels, but
Yeah.
um, so then there's three baristas behind the counter. So then I walked up to the second barista, and while I'm watching them actually make my coffee, I asked him. I said, why do you work here? And he's looked around. He said, I love it here. I love the smell. We just talked about the smell of coffee. I love being creative. My friends all work here. We have a fun time. I said, even when you deal with crazy coffee orders like mine, he goes, no, I get to be creative. I'm kind of passionate about chemistry and understanding how things make different flavors. And so it doesn't bother me at all because I think of myself as a coffee artist. And who doesn't want to create the best cup of Joe? And he's kind of smiled and thanked me I took my coffee to the last barista at the line, the one that actually hands you your coffee and
Oh,
says your name. I got to ask, with Riaan, do they ever, if you've ever ordered coffee, do they say your name right?
it's not just coffee; it's everywhere. It's like I have to tell the story. I mean, Rian, the name comes from my Afrikaans upbringing in South Africa. So when I was born, the name Rian was very popular. I mean, at a stage in primary school, we were 7 Rians in my one class. So we were Rian number 1, 2, 3, and 4. But everywhere else I go, like when I lived in Australia, when I lived in Mexico, and now living in the US, I get everything from Rihanna to Brian to Ryan. And you know what? I've been called a lot worse, so I don't mind it at all. It's just, as long as it's in the ballpark, I'm fine.
It's funny. I knew how to pronounce your name because my son's best friend growing up was Riaan.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
thought maybe you would have been a little surprised when we met for the first time. I actually pronounced your
Oh,
name
I'm
correctly.
ecstatic when it happens and people say, "Hey, Rihanna," and I'm like, "What? Yeah,
I
I'm in
know,
people."
I know. Well, I get like a Jerry a lot, a Jimmy,
Oh, yeah.
Jenny. Yeah, and I think it's because it's only one end of my name, so they kind of make it an R. I'm not really sure, but it always kind of happens that way. So he actually said my name correctly, so I felt like I could talk to him. So I did. I asked him. I go, why do you work here? And his response was very different because he kind of looked around and he said, I build businesses and build communities. And I now was the one kind of inquisitive, kind of looking at him a little strange. And he just said, take a look around the coffee shop and turned to walk away. So I did. I started kind of looking around the coffee shop and I noticed that there are a lot of people meeting, and like you could tell that there was some networking going on, and there were individuals working on their business and working on work, and there was people meeting, interviewing for jobs. It was a really busy cafe that day, and somebody was picking up a bunch of coffee orders for their for their office mates,
Yeah.
and he was right. Many businesses and business relationships begin with a cup of coffee in a coffee shop. And that's when I realized that really we've been looking at purpose and trying to find purpose only at one level. We only say, why am I here? At this one answer in this one level. And
Yeah.
that's why it's so difficult. Purpose in itself is not complex. It's how we're driven to use it that can sometimes be. And so what I decided was, how can I simplify and be able to teach so that people and individuals and leaders and organizations can maximize their profits and performance, aligning a strategy to purpose at very different levels. So
So
that
explain to me what you mean by levels of purpose, Jenny.
I love this because this was where I think my idea of purpose is very different than what I've seen out there in other books and conversations. So first of all, everything has a purpose. A purpose is a function. Everything.
I agree.
So you talk about like the microphone. You showed me your snazzy microphone. It has a purpose, right? You plug it in, it records you. It creates sound. The light over your head, the camera on the thing, plugs for in the wall. Everything, everything has a purpose.
Yep.
So the difference, and that means it's a function. The difference of levels is what's the impact of that purpose? What's the effect?
Okay.
So just to kind of review that, let's look at those three baristas. The first barista, she was there to get paid, make money, safety, security, a job. And that's that first level of purpose. It's for oneself.
Yeah.
And for this employee, it's important to be at that level one. They're there to make money. They're there to be safe. They're there to have security. And you have to have this level to be able to survive and function. Even when you're talking about like a microphone, if it doesn't work, it's not serving its purpose.
Well, definitely.
It
It
has
makes
to
life a
do
lot
something.
harder. Yeah.
So then you go to that second barista, and it's about who they work with, the culture, the environment, their friends, the smell of coffee, the joy of being around people, the love what they do, the experience for them. It's still for them. And you want to have your employees at level two. I mean, if you can, that's amazing. In fact, most companies pay millions of dollars to get their employees to feel and live the culture of their business. And
Yep.
that's where you create it. And it's a place where people feel connected, which is important because you spend most of your waking hours with these same people.
Well,
The
in fact, you
problem
spend more
is,
people with those
the
more
problem
time
is,
with those people than what you do with your own family at home.
You spend a lot more time. And so you want to make sure that when they're there, they enjoy being there. And so if you can get your employees to level two, and that's a goal for me, if I can help an organization or a business at least get their employees to feel like they want to be together, then that's that second level of purpose. And that's a good achievement. The only problem with that level, the only problem is it's temperamental in the idea that it's affected by things on the outside. Because if, let's
Yeah.
say it is your friends, right? You love working with your friends, and one of your friends leaves,
Mm-hmm.
then suddenly that relationships you have is different. Or you really had this great manager that was awesome and inspiring, and now they got promoted, and now the next manager you don't get along with. Or let's say that economic times are tough and there's layoffs. And so there's uncertainty and nervousness and anxiousness within the workforce. Or you get a huge customer complaint and it changes the dynamics. And you think of like some of the airlines right now going through some either technical issues or mechanical issues. And people are now, I mean, could you imagine working at one of those places where they're pretty much pro that company, but because of things that is going on in the outside of the world that they had no impact on, it's
Yep.
impacting the culture on the inside. So that's the only problem with that level two, is that if anything shifts or changes, people's investment into that and feeling a purpose can shift as well.
And
So even when you're talking about for yourself, like, when things get stressful externally, you
yeah.
start to go back and say, why am I even here? So that's the kind of problem with that level of purpose.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, just an example from my perspective, we always use this in training. An example of a guy going to a car company, walking into the. I'm not going to say which one because otherwise everyone's going to go buy it. But walking in and there's an executive assistant at the door, and they asked her, "So, what's your job? What's your purpose? For being here?" And she said, "To make the car go faster." And we were like a little bit baffled, and we're like, what do you mean?" And she said, "Well, if I do my job correctly, you'll get to your meeting in time. That meeting is going to lead to some results, which is going to lead to something impacting our race car, which then is going to translate into performance. And then from there, people are going to start buying our brand more or whatever. So it all starts with me, and that's her purpose." And we were that was like completely, blindsided by it because, you don't expect that type of answer. But that gave me a lot of insight into why people do what they do. And the people that really have they know exactly what their purpose is, or they have an idea what their purpose is. Not just at work, but at home too. They generally more grounded, more easygoing. They understand the process. They are a lot more engaged. And like you say, that's where we try and get companies too. You know, all the different
Well, and
levels that you're talking about make sense too, because not everyone's always going to be engaged, and to try and get them to that point every day, that's good luck.
well, and that's the thing. So I don't know. It's kind of, if you think about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, level
Yeah.
one is that safety and security that's getting your paycheck. Level two is the relationships and connections. And both of those things are important. You can't live in level three if you don't have level one and level two somewhere in play. You
Oh,
have to have those other pieces. That executive assistant you're talking about is kind of like the third barista, which is that level three. Because the
yeah.
reality is that barista, it's a different way because the impact is different because they're never going to see that. That barista doesn't know that that cup of coffee led to a business
Oh, yeah.
solution. That executive assistant doesn't know if things are going to actually be impacted this way because of their performance. It's a belief beyond yourself. The first two levels of purpose are how does it impact me?
Yeah.
That third level of purpose is fulfillment and knowing that I make a difference somewhere, even though I may never see it. I may never see that impact. Um,
I
and
really like the
eventually,
way.
at the end of the day, people are about themselves. I think you and I have discussed that before.
Oh,
People
yeah.
behave in a way that benefits them. It's human nature. You
That's human
can't
nature.
discount it, and it's not a negative thing.
What's in it for
So
me?
I think what's in it for me, right? It's and that's not a bad thing. I mean, that's how we function as adults. We are in that way. But if you can get them to start thinking about, what kind of impacts they can make to others in society, things that they'll never see, but that they believe that has that impact, then you're right. They are more laid back. They are more in tune because they aren't so affected by outside things. You can't
Yeah.
remove level one and two. You can't take away safety and relationship and expect
I
them
know,
just to
we
be
need that.
gleefully happy.
Yeah.
Right. But you have to have that. But there could be disruptions in those areas and they still know that they're achieving something more. So I've been thinking about this as I was going to talk to you today, because how can you think about that when you apply your Six Sigma and your certifications and the trainings that you created, because you're creating a product, you're delivering that product, you're delivering certifications. If you
Yeah.
were to think to the next level and level three, where could you see that applying for you and your organization?
Well, the cool thing is, Jenny, I mean, we've worked all over the world, and different cultures have different ways of looking at things, and different countries handle things differently. So when we start looking at the certifications, our white belt is always about just what is Lean and what is Six Sigma. So it's a basic overview of telling you, look, we are introducing a change program, and believe me, the only thing that's constant is change. And then we go to our, yellow belt, which is, the start of problem solving and actually, asking the question why 5 times. That's how, it's a very common way of solving problems. But how do kids learn? They ask you, Daddy, why is the sky blue? Or Daddy, why is the plant's green? And eventually you just run out of talent and you just like, I don't know, Google it. But basically from there on, that's all around giving people skills and changing the culture and, getting people more involved with the day-to-day issues rather than handing it to a manager and walking away. And that's that sense of purpose is, why do I come to work? Is it because I want to have a bad day? I bet you no one says that. Or do I want to have a good day? But then how am I going to make it a good day? So in our green belt and our blue belt specifically, we teach people a lot of tools, but we believe in the approach of behaviors and results. You're never going to have sustainable results if you don't have the right behaviors. Like if I'm just focusing on efficiency on my shift or on my day, and I do everything in my power, but I don't set up the next shift or the next day's, production or, whatever should happen, then it's going to be a failure overall, not just on that shift. And it's amazing how many people don't think of it that way. They only look at it from, hey, I want to have a good time at work and then I'm going to go home. It's like, no, let's think about the bigger picture. So if you have a good shift, you set up your next shift and they set up the next shift, your communication gets so much better. People actually enjoy coming to work because the same thing, like you said, you don't know what's happening in that person's private life. They might be escaping to come to work and, that's their happy place at that time. Or look, it's the other way around. But we definitely focus on, a lot with the green and with the blue belt. The blue belt's for managers on how to manage green and yellow belts. But it's more around that problem solving efforts and running a project and stakeholder management and getting people involved rather than having people in silos trying to solve the same bloody problem. I mean, I'm sure you've had some of those issues in your life. But
Yeah.
it's fun when you get people to that point where, you teach them something simple like 5S, sort, shine, set in order, standardize, sustain. And you can see the light bulbs coming on. It's like you can see they're like, oh, this has actually got, a way of doing it, which is going to be successful. And then the guys usually come up and they're like, oh, you won't believe what I did this weekend. I 5S'd my garage, or I taught my kids how to, clean their rooms and make it sustainable. So, it's those kind of things that make it worthwhile. And I mean, like you said, everything's got a purpose. And if you don't have a
Well,
purpose, if you've lost your purpose a little bit, through the certifications, we always try and help motivate people on and going back to the reason why they started in the first place.
well, and I think that I want you to even think beyond that because think about those, the guy who got his garage cleaned out. What did he find in that garage or what could he put in the garage now? Or, I mean, think about those project managers you've trained that learned to silo, what relationships were created from that. And I mean, you could expand that
Right.
to just beyond that, the function of their job, but even where it could lead. And that can be a little difficult. So I really have to change a little bit of the narrative because I do think we spend a lot of time focused on our why, but I actually think you need to start with like who you are to
Hmm.
understand who you serve to be able to then understand why you're doing it and why you're here. So the first piece I always start with to simplify, because remember my goal is to simplify the discussion and make it something that any leader can say themselves and even say, to their employees and understand. So I start with looking at like the personalities because you're actually defining who you are. And, there's lots of different ways to look at personality. You could start with, like DISC or Myers Briggs or, strength finders, what birth order you are in your family, what sign you're under, so there's a lot of ways to think about personality. Um, like for instance, I am I'm the oldest and a Pisces. So do I behave different than my sister, who's the youngest and an Aries? I would tell you yes, but is it because of the time I was born or is it because I was raised different? I don't know, and I think it's a combination of both that kind of come into play.
I definitely
What's your
think,
sign,
yeah.
Riaan? What's your sign?
What do you think?
Oh,
Yes. Look,
What are you?
I'm definitely an Aries. So
You're an Aries.
definitely, and also a D on the discs. And look, for me, it's important. Something that I learned over time, and also, teaching people this stuff, and the behavioral side of things is, once you know what you are, it doesn't mean that now you walk around being all proud of it and expect everyone to treat you like that.
What?
It's more that you understand how you think, and then, how can you relate to other people that you now know what their personality is, or what their situation is. Because if I walk around like an Aries all the time, just shouting out demands, and taking the lead on everything, I don't think I don't think I'm going to get very far. Even as a big boy. So we'll see.
Well, I think so. I agree with you. I think I don't like to be pigeonholed based on personality, and all those different
Yeah.
assessments have different things that they measure. I think they think they're all the
Oh yeah.
same, but they actually measure very different things. So I like using DISC the best because I feel like it's a behavior and communication measurement. But to me, it's not about who you are. It's how you respond naturally, how you behave, what feels most natural for you. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean you can't do anything in any of the other areas. It's just what feels easier for you. Like I don't have to think about it. So I'm an I, right? That doesn't surprise you. So I'm an I, which means I am direct. I speak. I have no problem speaking and connecting with people, but I'm
Didn't
people
mention.
focused. So I'm about helping people and being around people and interacting with people. And that's natural for me. It's
Yeah.
more unnatural for me to not say something. And it's more unnatural for me to be only task focused and not people focused. Doesn't mean I can't do those things. I
Well,
just
and
have
that's
to think
also,
harder about it.
you touched on it now, but I think that's also why we like having these conversations, because, both of us like to connect with people, see what they're all about, but also learning from them and how they actually handle situations. But it's like you say, I don't walk around, going, I'm an Aries, look at me, I'm leading, follow me. It's more for me about how do I get people to follow me naturally, and not because of my star sign, or what this told me, or whatever feedback I got on the day. It's more around feeling comfortable, building those relationships, and then you know being in that position where you can influence things, and that's important for me. It's like, you know influencing an outcome in such a way that you actually feel like you're adding value, and you're not hindering anything, and then we can move forward.
I am so glad you mentioned the word value because actually value is the second piece of defining who you are. So
Hmm.
I start with your personality. So what feels natural for you and what you're kind of naturally driven to do, either, through communication and behavior and focus. But then I think about what you value and what motivates you every day. So I do, and I've been doing this for a long time, a value assessment. And I used to make it very hard. I took like 300 words and I would force the group to put into those 300 words, take it down to 5 and then down to 3. And that was hard because a couple of reasons. One, I would say to them, when you're looking at the words, don't don't judge the word. Define it by your own definition, not by others. Because I remember the first time somebody told me that had a high ego. I was ego driven. And I was like really upset. I was like, are they saying I'm arrogant? And I realized no, their definition of ego
Yeah.
driven was
Hmm.
confidence. And I defined that word differently.
Yeah.
So it's not about so much what the word means to anybody else. It's what the words are words. We call things what we call them because somebody one day started calling it that.
Sticks and stuff.
So you
Yeah.
define what it means. Yeah, or maybe I'm arrogant. I don't know. But it was funny because I used to do this huge thing, and every time people would come up with the same thing, they'd say family, love, loyalty, and I did the assessment myself, and I felt like horribly guilty because my number one value was financial freedom. And I was like, God, like that makes me sound like I mean, look, I like to spend money. Wait till I come to Florida. You see how many shoes I bring on one trip. I have no
I,
problem spending money, but it's not about making money. It was about that security and that certainty and that security and being able to provide for myself and not ask others and things like that. It doesn't mean that I don't value other things. I would love I love love. I love family. I think all of those things are important, but I know that I have sacrificed those things for financial freedom. I know that I have missed concerts and ball games and I've taken jobs and worked with people that I haven't been creative or not what I wanted to do because of the amount because of the security that the financial freedom gave to me. Now as I'm getting older, I think it's shifting a little bit, but it's still there. And I have to know what my personality is and then what is my wakes me up every day and gets me motivated to function to then define how does that apply to my purpose? Because now I can say, what can I do? Because I really could make money doing anything, right? I mean, well,
Oh
about
yeah,
anything,
I mean, we
but
can.
I could make money doing a lot of things. But because I know my personality
Yeah,
likes to talk and likes to be around people, then
yeah,
I'm going to try to find ways to apply that to people. So that's where I look at my level one. I'm going to take a job that allows me to be creative and be around people. I'm going to work with people and be in an environment culture where I have good interactions. I get to mentor people, I get to coach people, and
yeah,
I get to feel that impact of that. I get to see them, just like you talked about light bulb moments after I teach something, I get to see that. I get to see people change their behaviors and improve. But on the end, my whole purpose is I want to inspire people to reach their potential. I want them to see all that they can be and have that confidence and, to be able to perform at their best.
yeah.
So I may never see the impact of that. I walk away from a training class and I don't know what resonated or what changed or what made them think about it. I will tell you though, I have been lucky a few times in my life, and I'd love to hear if you've got any of these where people have come back to me later in life and have said to me, hey, based on your conversation advice, I went back to school and this is where I am now. And
Yeah.
then, I mean, then I think about what could that happen, how they change in learning for their kids and changing that education cycle in their family. Or I've had, and we'll talk about this one day, I promise. I teach kind of a workshop on words and the impact of negative words. And I
Yeah.
share two words that have a really negative impact. And I've had people 20 years later that have come up to me and said, I never use those words. Like that they realize. And I'm like, that was a 3-minute presentation 20 years ago in their life. And they're still thinking
What
about that.
two
And
words?
even the people that, because I talk to everybody. So even people like on planes, restaurants, standing in line for the bathroom, because
Yeah.
women always stand in lines for the bathroom. I can't imagine how many people I've talked to that maybe I've said something, encouraged them, because I'm always teaching too. Like I'm always walking around teaching something.
But
So I wonder how many people that I've impacted. I'll never see that. So I have to believe that I'm fulfilled from knowing that that has occurred and happened. That's purpose. So then I try to take that and apply it to business. So before I tell you how I do that, just really quickly, um, what are can you think of any time that you've been blessed where somebody's come to you and said, Rian, you changed my life?
so, I mean, talking about that purpose, I mean, for me, it's basically accomplishments. I don't like sitting still. It's not in my nature. I like being busy, but I like feeling like I'm actually achieving something. And that's probably why I never would be a great Uber driver because, like you say, you see people for a split second, you see them, in a bigger scheme of things. We had one year at one of my training places that we did 9,000 hours of training, man hours of training in like 9 months. It was crazy. And out of that, we cycled through, hundreds and hundreds of people. And you know how it gets. It's like a little bit monotonous, but you still try and, make it interesting for people because you try and, better your own skills and everything else. And yeah, I've had over the years, people contact me on LinkedIn, people email me, on Facebook or whatever, and just say, hey, remember that day when we had that, conversation about whatever in the classroom? It's like, yep, like, well, I finally listened to you and I've started my own business, or, I've moved on. I'm now a supervisor instead of, whinging about things. And, that's very rewarding because you get to close that little loop. But you do know that there's people out there that's, I mean, who your biggest influences in your life were, like your mentors, the ones that, might have just said something to you or done something for you that that put you in a completely different plane. So yeah, I mean, for me, it's very interesting, and that's part of the passion of my job. That's why we created the certifications. We've got the trainers, we got the trainees, we got the coaches, because it really is so important that people understand, where they are and where they would like to go, but then how to get there. And that's where the fun part in our business comes from, is that human interaction and seeing people perform. And yeah, I take a lot of gratification out of that.
I bet you that there are so many people out of that 9,000 that you went through, 9,000 hours of training and what you went through, that you made a bigger impact. And maybe they didn't realize it at the time, but if they really
Oh yeah,
reflected upon it, they probably would find that. And that having, that could be really complex. You think about like the pebble dropping and the ripples in the water, and you don't know where everything lands. So I don't want to, when I go into a business, if I start talking about dropping pebbles, I don't know that that's going to resonate. So I really want more to focus on understanding your purpose, understanding that there's a bigger picture, accepting it, and then how can you align that to performance and strategy? And that you can do it with about anything. So I'll just give you a couple of really quick examples.
yeah, man.
One would be like on time management. So, we teach classes on time management. The reality is you can't really manage time itself. Time is time. Everybody's given the same, it's a one equal thing in life, right? Everybody's given the same amount of hours in a day.
Yep.
So it's not about so much time management as it is managing your priorities. And so when I talk about defining your purpose, you look at your priorities, you look at the tasks you have to do, and does it align to your purpose? And if it doesn't, can you get rid of it? Can you delegate it? Can you eliminate it? Can you find a way for it to align to purpose? Is there a way to like layer it and make it like your executive assistant example, being able to see the line of sight of something bigger? Even though it seems like maybe a task that doesn't align holistically in my purpose, I can find a way to align it. So that's what I work with employees and managers, is how do I get you to see the impact externally and then be able to line of sight these tasks and work activities so you can prioritize and manage the day more effectively. Or communication. Um, I drive my friends crazy, just so you know, because anytime they're going to do something, like, anytime they're
Yeah.
upset, they want to say something snarky, I always ask them, what's your purpose? Like, why are you doing it? Like,
Yeah.
what's your purpose? What's your objective? And does that align to your purpose? If your objective is to educate, is to amplify a relationship, great. If your objective is to hurt somebody, to get them back, to show them what, woo, to like whatever, then is your purpose aligned? Is your purpose to hurt people? Because if your purpose is to hurt people, if that's really if your number one value is making people cry,
Yep.
then go ahead and send that email. Go ahead and make that gossip. Go ahead and make those jokes. Do whatever you need to. But if nobody has their purpose aligned to hurting somebody. So
I
if
don't know.
that's not your purpose, I don't know. Yeah, there might be a few, but
What,
we're
what,
not
are,
going to talk
what are
about that.
keyboard warriors out there?
There are. Even them, I wonder. I'm like, what's your purpose? What's your objective in doing that? But if that
Yeah.
is your objective in life, then think about it. And
Go
once
for
I
it.
say that to them, once once I ask them, Riaan, is your objective to hurt people? Most of the time, they're like, no, and I'm like, well, then don't send the email,
And then do it.
or
Yeah.
don't do it. Or think about, if it is to educate them on something, how could you educate them in a non-attacking way? How can you
Yeah.
communicate it in a way that's not defensive or attacking?
And
So
keeping in mind that
that
everyone learns differently, and everyone don't react to the same responses the same way. So yep.
so that's my business strategy. That's how I take purpose, which is a very big idea, and simplify it down to what's your purpose, how do you apply it to different levels, and how does that levels align to your business strategy, your performance, your objectives as an organization. And if I can get the senior leaders in the organization to understand that, and then they can get their leaders to understand that, and they could be at level 3, and they can think about
Yeah.
succession planning and thinking about strategies and approaches, and how to build the business and how to restructure things. And they can get it to at least get down to their employees, a majority of employees at level 2, but even some of your influencing employees at that level 3,
Yeah.
man, then the externals are not going to make that big of an impact on you. The things that are going on outside in the world, the economy and things like that, you're there because you know that you are still fulfilling your purpose and you're still aligned to that purpose.
Yeah.
And you're going to be able to ride the wave and survive through those storms.
And
So
stay true to yourself.
that's,
Yeah.
yeah, and staying true to yourself and feeling fulfilled at the end of the day. Because
Yeah.
and not feeling so lost and having to go back to those notes of why am I here? What am I doing? Because that's,
But that
you know,
changes too.
that can be a
Yeah.
little overwhelming,
You
especially
do it and you take some.
during change. You're right.
Oh, yeah. But look, I just want to say we cover a lot of this in our almost to be released Purple Belt certification that Jenny's
So
helping us
exciting.
with and taking the lead on. And yeah, so just for everyone out there that's watched this show, thank you for watching. And Jenny, as always, it's great talking to you. I think we should have more of
Always
these
a pleasure.
conversations. I just don't think they've got enough data to store it all. But yeah, that was a great conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It was good seeing you.
As always, catch you soon. Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.